Good evening. It is Tuesday, the 2nd of July, 2024, and this is the 45 Day Show, episode 25. I can't believe we've got to 25 episodes. It's crazy. Tonight, I've got a very special guest. He's been putting out some amazing 45s recently on his brand new label, Echo Chamber Recordings. Great DJ, been a guest on Coffee and Donuts, on Twitch with Ouija, and yeah, just I think a really interesting person to talk to, and he's into 45. So here he is. Without further ado, we have Mr. Si Cheeba.
Hello,
How you
Criztoz. How
doing?
you doing?
I'm good, man. I keep thinking I really need to get one of those fancy buttons where I press the button and then there's like a round of applause.
Yeah, get some canned laughter as well.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, no, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for
No,
giving
you're
up some
welcome.
time. I know you're a busy man. You know, these 45s just keep on coming. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's just an ongoing process. Yeah, I'm trying to always try and keep a few steps ahead. So I've always got stuff in the pipeline. I mean, there's always stuff coming along in a few months' time, or even next year, even. So I'm trying to keep ahead of myself to make sure I can keep churning them out.
Yeah, exactly, because they're popular. I mean, we'll talk about them a lot more in a bit later, but they're very popular, which is good. So obviously, there's a constant desire for more, isn't there? We're going to say hello to That's AR. He's listening and
Hey,
watching
my
the
man.
football.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, that's a good thing. You know, switch the commentary off and just listen to us. So yeah, right. So all of my guests, I always take them right to the beginning because I'm always intrigued to find out who it was who first got them into music and this passion. So, for you, from a young age, who was it who first got you into music? Was it brothers, sisters, parents, friends? Who was it?
It was all really. It wasn't a person as such. I was sort of was always interested in music from sort of quite a young age, but never really had any sort of direction as such. The first music I got into was for Christmas 1979. Uh, my mum and dad spotted I was quite enjoying watching Gary Newman on Top of the Pops and Tube Army, so
Right.
I got the Tube Army LP on tape for Christmas 1979, and that sort of really that was my first foray into music. Really digging into all that sort of sound, as well as stuff like at the time as well. It was two tone, Jam, Secret Affair, all that kind of sound as well. It was all going along. It's sort of 9 and 10-year-old kids really getting into music and really getting into youth cults. There's a lot of different stuff going on then.
Amazing. And what sort of format was that? Was it vinyl at that stage or not?
Uh, I think the first vinyl I actually bought was the Dickies, who did a version of a Banana Splits theme tune, and I bought that on yellow vinyl. Uh,
Right.
and that was sort of partly a nostalgic thing. Because I remembered watching the Banana Splits when I was a kid. So when they
Yeah.
did the punk version of the theme tune, I sort of gravitated towards that. But I wasn't. I suppose I got the Tube by Army thing on cassette, and then I got the sort of LPs on vinyl after that. But supposedly it was really when I really got into a mod scene when I was 14, 15 years old, sort of period. Uh, Started getting a little bit of pocket money, started getting into proper music, and then started buying stuff on the regular.
And were you obviously going to record shops at that time to buy stuff? Can you remember any
Yeah,
of
I
the
mean, I
early shops
suppose.
you were buying from?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was buying stuff from. There was a few little second-hand shops in. I was living in Bolton then, but there was little shops in Manchester. I could always remember going one afternoon and went across to like a friend's club in Stockport. This would have been about 1985, and it was like an afternoon little mod club they had playing strictly black music, really, all 45s. So it's well worth getting about 2 or 3 buses to get to because met some good lads there. Then after that finished, I think that finished about 5 o'clock, and there was a record shop round the corner, and I went in there and I got a couple of great little 45s for £2 or £3, which was sort of virtually every penny I had on me at the time. But some good stuff, some sort of Hammond organ R&B stuff, that sort of sound. So that would have been when I was just around 15 then. Started seriously getting it, and at that age when uh, started to get towards leaving school and getting a part-time job and all that kind of stuff. So I actually had money to spend, which sort of helps.
So Shoestring says he was a 14-year-old mod hunting down records as well.
Yeah, that's it. that's what we were all into. There was quite a sort of group of us we knew people from all over the country. By the time we were 16, we were going all to different cities every weekend to different events. And it was that scene where it was everyone was buying 45s. It was all the original 60s soul, R&B, jazz, Latin, all that kind of stuff. So it was a real scene then, and people used to travel from town to town. So one week we'd be in Leeds, the next week we'd be in Lowestoft, the next weekend Newcastle, weekend after that Glasgow all nighter, and then back in
When
Manchester
are
the
we
following
talking?
week.
What sort of years are we talking?
I'm talking 85 to 87, 88 sort of
That's
period.
amazing that it was still, 45s were a big thing then.
Yeah, it was the usual thing for. I mean, people. I suppose the kids at our age, my generation, were. It was a whole record collection they carry around in a little 45 box, and then you'd sort of share them around at events, and people would look through your record, have a look through your records, see what you got, and all that kind of stuff. And that was sort of like the whole thing. And then you met people, then you go around the house, and their little record box wasn't all they had. My mate Dougie, he had a good job doing a milk round, I think, when he was about 13 or 14. So he used to buying a lot more records than me. And he went round to his house. He had a little cellar with some decks set up as well, sort of the old Citronic turntables. And he had like rafts of records. He had like a few drawers full of 45s. So we'd go down there, and it'd generally be a bit of a sort of, if there wasn't a night on or a club on, everybody would gravitate around there, going to Dougie's cellar. And that was quite a sort of learning experience, really.
I mean, Shoestring saying that every youth club had a turntable. No, I guess probably back then, maybe
Yeah, it
they
wasn't so
did.
much youth clubs. No, we were putting on little nights. We were like 14 and 15, but we were able to go to pubs, in Bolton, pubs or working man's clubs, and let them hire us out the place for like 30 quid. So if 30 people turned up, we'd all pay £1 and have like a bit of a mod disco, uh, from say 7:30 till 10:30. And that
Yeah.
was that was that was a lot of the clubs around those times. Bolton, Bury, Manchester, Stockport. That was a sort of midweek thing we'd do when we were still at school.
Amazing. And it's interesting, obviously, you're talking about working men's clubs because Jawad Jones, one of our good DJ friends, does a night there now, female fronted music played by female DJs at the Walthamstow Trade Hall. So it's interesting that
Oh right,
it's
yeah,
effectively the same sort of thing that they were hiring it out to you guys to have put on a party with 45s. And then it's still the same sort of thing happening all these years later.
yeah. I mean, I suppose on the back of that, there was a whole tradition of the Northern Soul Nights as well, which was going along, which were obviously a generation older than us. So we'd be going along to the sort of Northern Soul Nighters, which were often in there was all days and all nighters in different types of venues. Uh, we were sort of going to some of those as well, although some of us were more gravitating towards the sort of rhythm and blues and jazz and Latin, as well as a sort of 60s soul as well. So not strictly 100% Northern. I mean, there'd always be things like the 100 Club as well. We used to go down to that when we were about 16. We'd sort of do that on 20 quid to get a coach down to London from Manchester, get into the 100 Club. If you had a couple of quid left over for a McDonald's breakfast before you got home, that was a bonus.
But again, it's how that was all organised because we're talking like you say, sort of late 80s. There was no internet, was there? Really, no mobile phones.
No, no, it was all there
How
was.
did
It was
you?
fanzines. There was a little national newsletter. It used to go around. It used to list little mod events and clubs that went on all around the country. And that was like a weekly little newsletter. I think it's called the Phoenix List at the time. So a lot of people formed little clubs in different places called little societies, really. So there was like a group of people in Bolton would put on a do, a group of people in Bury, a group of people in Stockport, and then likewise you had little groups over in Leeds, and they all called themselves different things like the 24 Hours Mod Society or the Weekend Dancers and all that kind of thing. So it was very good in a way to get that sort of organisation going, and if you'd get people coming together to put things on and all muck in together. Really, it wasn't about making money as such. It was just about all getting together to put on an event that we could go to because there wasn't anything else to do.
It's I mean, again, it's sort of reminiscent of what the sort of events that are going on now that we're sort of putting on now, isn't it? You know, like when we're doing like the
It's very much
45
so.
thing.
Yeah, it's hardly any different, to be honest. Yeah,
Yeah. Again, we're
yeah,
doing it to bring people together, bring communities together to play really good music and hang out in a place, like you say, that you'd want to be.
yeah. Likewise, all the sort of clubs, mainly all the clubs I've been involved in over the last 30 years, have all been people from a similar background or with a similar attitude. And in fact, let's put on a night. You know, if we make any money out of it, it's a bonus. But we're not putting on a night to make money. It's all to put on a night for like-minded people to enjoy the music. You know, any money over the top is a bonus. You know, obviously, if you've got a big night going on, like there was things like the South London Soul Train and Madame Jojo's and that, which had a good crowd in. And then likewise, you get recompensed as a DJ for that. But other nights we put on ourselves, you know, it'd be, you know, a few quid each at the end of the night and, you know, happy days.
But again, it's about the music, isn't it? And obviously, I was going to say,
Exactly.
when did you first get into 45s? But obviously, you know, it's from a really early age, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, that was it. It was a normal culture of us collecting all these sort of 60s soul records, really, especially the mod scene was very similar to, like, it came from the sort of soul scene, really, the Northern Soul and all that kind of stuff. So then I suppose then it wasn't, we buy a few albums here and there, and especially like the brilliant compilation LPs like Kent Records and all those kinds of stuff. But it was all already, we had that attitude of wanting to get the original 45. So it was all that sort of snobbery and one-upmanship and competition. So that was all. It was all part of it, especially when you're a little arrogant 15-year-old. You know.
cool, man. Um, okay, so we've talked a little bit about DJing. We've talked a little bit about record collecting. Production, obviously, you've got the label, and we'll talk about the label a bit later. But when did you first get into production and why?
I sort of first started dabbling. Well, the story is I didn't really know what hip hop was. It was only really late, probably around 88, 89, but I started hearing hip hop records that were sampling records I had. So, for example, Gangstar used James Brown's Bring It Up, as well as mixing up with Night in Tunisia. And it was then I was like, whoa, what is this going on? There's these guys in New York, hip hop guys, and they're listening to the same records that we listen to. We thought it was only like 30 people in a little club that listened to these in North
Right.
Manchester or something. So I sort of then started getting into the hip hop side and hearing production, and then it was a case of then you'd heard records you knew, and then on the opposite way, you'd hear records you'd want to buy the original of and all that kind of stuff. So there's always that to and fro stuff. And then obviously you'd hear records you think, oh, that'd make a good sample. But I was only really dabbling with it. I was living in Manchester up until the late 90s. And I sort of dabbled with it a little bit. There was a few guys sort of got together and we did little things. But it was a bit of a case of sort of too many people sort of trying to all get involved in one. There was one afternoon I sat down with just one guy and we sort of made this track. And in a way, that sort of set the seeds for me to sort of get my head around how to construct a track out of samples and go from like a beginning to end with an actual song and a pattern in between. So it made sense rather than just messing about with a loop. It was just an ongoing loop for, for 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Make it a song,
but then,
effectively, isn't it?
yeah, into actually, yeah, something more like a song rather than just messing about with loops, because I think people can do that. There was loads of loops, LPs, and all that kind of stuff. But I suppose a lot of the hip hop instrumentals were quite basic in that respect. So that was why I enjoyed more of the stuff that did a bit more on top of the hip hop instrumentals. Obviously, when it's got a rap on top of it, it needs to be nice and clean. But when there's more of the DJ tracks, like the sort of the premiere tracks and all those sort of stuff he did on his own, like Deep Concentration, and then later on in the 90s, you had the Shadow, Chemist, all those guys coming
Yeah.
through, and obviously DJ Format again at the end of the 90s, and you had that sort of whole culture of Cold Cut and Ninja Tunes and all those sort of production sides as well. All that was sort of coming together. So all that was sort of all in one big melting pot as well, with still buying a lot of old records and all the different styles that were coming up then, Brazilian soundtracks, all the stuff that was sort of being discovered in the 90s. It was such a fertile period. So, yeah, I sort of dabbled a bit in the 90s. And then I relocated down to Essex, and then was working in London, and then doing a lot of more DJing between Southend and London. And then I started, uh, really got into it. I sort of got a PC and Audacity, and worked out how to sort of do basic re-edits, which then I ended up getting put on 45 on Carver and putting those out. Well, not putting them out, just actually taking them with me to play out, and then sort of getting a bit of a response back from there as well. So that sort of set the seed on, again, sort of constructing a new tune out of an existing tune and
It's
rearrangements and all
amazing you
that
had
kind of
that
stuff.
ability to do that, though, isn't it? To firstly make the production that you wanted to do, able to carve it onto a 45, so you could play it at one of your events that you're going to.
Yeah, that was a big changing point, really, because I never really sort of did events that had CD players, so it was just good to sort of have that availability. I think with sort of instant carving things where you get dub plates done quite easily only sort of came about in the sort of mid 2000s. So that was quite a key thing to me to then go, oh right, well I've got an LP track and I like it, but if I extended that, it'd be even better. And it wasn't on a 45 anyway, so that was two good reasons to then do a re-edit and put it on a 45, and then you get people coming up going, oh, what's this version, or what's this, or I didn't know it was on a 45. And that sort of let onto when I was DJing with other people like Nick Weston. I used to do South London Soul Train with a room with him all night, and there was a few of my edits. But I was playing then, and he kept saying to me, "Oh, you should get this pressed up. I'll sell a load at Juno." And so that sort of planted the seed, really. But it took a while for me to actually get off my arse and do anything about it, to be
Yeah, so I
honest.
mean, when is that then? When is that
So
period?
this is really,
So
yeah. I mean, sort of the
2000s, you said.
re-edits. I started doing the re-edits mid 2000s, and then it was sort of a few years later I was DJing with Nick, and that was just before I sort of then relocated up to Scotland. Uh, so yeah, part
So
of
it's
that
moving to
re-edit thing.
Scotland that has stopped you doing it.
Yeah, because I gave up my day job. I was
Yeah.
working in the city at the time, so working in the city and DJing quite, probably 2 or 3 times a week as well. So I didn't really have any spare time because I was working long hours as well, commuting in from Southend. So that was, 2.5 hours out of your day before you'd even started work. So,
Yeah.
it was just keeping on top of a DJing really, but all the time there was these ideas going through my head and thinking, oh, I could do that, I could do this. What about that tune? That bit of tune works really well. And so all these things have been building up for years in my mind, in my mental notebook, really. Uh, and yeah, I mean, one of the things there was also, the feedback from people of the stuff I was doing. I think I mentioned to you leading up to this about the sort of when I first met Format was
Yeah.
because he was doing a gig at the Jazz Cafe, and it was linked to the whole reissue of the Latin catalogue from Fania Records, and Format was doing a remix and a mixed CD for that. And then I sort of introduced myself to him then because I knew Dean Rudland, who was sort of also involved in it then. I said to him, oh, I got quite a lot of Boogaloo records. I'll send you over some CDs of that. And he's like, oh, brilliant, cheers. And at the same time, I sent him a CD of some re-edits I did. And they landed on his doormat, and he phoned me up the same day and says, oh, these re-edits are these records you have? And I said, yeah, but just re-edits of records I own. And he's like, oh, right. I tell you what, if you've got lots of stuff like this, you know, if you're free next week, bring a bag of records, come round mine, And we just sort of then hooked up from then on, just hooking up and then just hanging out in the evening and just playing tunes. I wasn't even talking about production or anything like that with him. It was just more like, one of these back to my place things. If you listen to this, or if you like this, listen to that. So it's all that mutual thing. But there was a lot of that going on in London at the time with the whole Vinyl Vultures crew, which also leading on to the next part of the story. It was partly when I sort of first met Greg Belson and all those guys as well at the time. That was in the early 2000s. So there was a sort of Vinyl Vultures meetups of sharing records. It wasn't just 45s, but that was quite a big part of it. So it was all sharing tunes, meeting up. So you had people like Rob Life uh, from Breaking Bread, me and Greg Belson and a few other people. Then you had like Rich Hero, and there was a lot. Rubber Funk came along, Johnny Cuba, all those sort of guys we used to have like a monthly meetup session in Islington. So this was in the sort of 2000s. So all that was sort of all coming together at the same time as well. So meeting all these people and getting the feedback and just all exchanging information about tunes as well. You know, it was done on internet forums. It was really before even Facebook was going along, and there wasn't really even sound clips online so much. You know, if you were buying off eBay, you'd have to sort of second guess things. Really, you'd buy stuff blind on eBay then as well. So it was good to have the forums where people would go, "Oh, I've heard this record's brilliant. Come along next week and we'll play it." And so you were hearing these records that way, even before the
Yeah.
partly the first stage of the internet, really.
Yeah, because obviously we're very spoilt now that we can just turn on Twitch and watch people playing 45s, pretty much all the
Yeah,
time.
exactly. Or
It's a
just
very different world, isn't it?
hearing about a record and then looking on your phone and it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
That was 20 years ago. It wasn't there.
Did that make it better when you found a record you really loved?
Uh,
When you heard a record and then you
yeah. I mean,
found out what
partly,
it was
yeah.
and you could then go away and buy it?
I think that's it. There was always a fun about the chase of it. There was a fun of a chase, and there was also the records that you got. There was always a story of how you actually arrived and actually managed to get a physical copy of it. Is because you might have heard it a few years ago before, and then you found out what it was. 5 years after you heard it, and then you finally found out where you could possibly source a copy from. You know, so it wasn't a sort of instantaneous thing then. But you had
It's
so
not
many
it's
things
not a
going on.
Shazam and Discogs thing that
No,
you
there
can do
wasn't. There
now.
wasn't a Discogs or anything like that. It was just sort
No.
of the dawn of eBay and stuff. So I suppose the dawn of eBay really was. I was always buying Latin soul records and that, but when eBay first came up, that's when I started buying quite a number from America when it was still cheap to ship over. So I was just buying albums by artists and 45s, picking all those up, the stuff I'd missed out. But there was still that sort of. We'd always been around with soul dealers and specialist dealers before then, but it was all it's taken a while to all come together, as I say.
Yeah, it's amazing. So obviously it's gotten more expensive to buy records. Obviously, you're talking there about times when you could ship them in from America. People don't really tend to do that anymore just because it's gotten so expensive, almost as
Yeah, I mean,
expensive as the record, isn't
yeah,
it?
exactly. I mean, I still originally find record. I mean, I don't really spend so much on original records so much anymore like I used to because A, I've not really got the income so much anymore, and B, I'm more concentrated on then reinterpreting stuff I've already got.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, I still see good records at good prices, but then you realise it's going to cost you an extra $20 or $30. Then you're probably going to get stung for customs. So what seems like a £15 record will cost you 55 quid. It's
Yeah,
just gone mental.
I know. And it's almost going to get to the stage where people are only able to really buy from their own countries. So go to
Yeah, I mean,
record
it
shops,
seems
like,
to be going that way
which isn't
already, doesn't
necessarily a
it?
bad thing.
Yeah, especially
Cheap
after
record
Brexit.
shops.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But it's just, you know, you like to be able to access as much music as you can. So it's great that you could buy it from Europe, could buy it from America, Australia, or wherever. And now it's getting quite difficult because that comes back to you having a record label and wanting, I assume, to get your music to all corners of the earth as possible. Makes it harder to get that reach, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that I've got a couple of people sort of reached out to me when I first started up the label. So in Australia, Dr. Diggins sort of
Yeah.
has my sort of a few people buy direct from me in Australia, but then Dr. Diggins does. I'll send a batch over to him to then sell on, and I try and do that as cheap as possible, postage wise, and hopefully get it through at a sort of lower price at customs and all that kind of stuff. And likewise in America, there's Bum Rush Vinyl, Bum Rush 45 do a batch as well, so I'll send to those. There's a guy in Japan. What's he called now? I've forgotten what he's called now. Sorry. There's a similar thing with there's a guy in Japan takes
Yeah.
stuff off me as well. So they're getting round as well as direct buyers as well. Still happy to buy stuff off me because I'll try and put them through as as
Cool.
gifts and all those sort of customs ways.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the label then, because obviously you've explained how it took a while to get to the stage where you were ready to do it. But why did you start the label, and what does it promote essentially?
I started the label basically after a couple of years. I was doing my show on Totally Wired Radio, which I've been doing about 5 years now, and that's called the Echo Chamber Show. And on that, I was putting in more and more my own little re-edits and little tracks I've been working on. And after a bit, there was a few friends and friends of friends who were saying, "Oh, I like that track. You should put it on a 45." And people were saying this more and more often. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll do that. I'll call you bluff then. You
Yeah.
better make sure you buy it if I'm going to do this. So I went down, and the first release I did was the Boogaloo Lessons 1 and 2. And that sort of started off going back to my roots again, because I started off with putting that together with a lot of records that we listened to on the mod scene. And then gradually, when I was doing the production, it ended up using more and more of the Latin stuff from that time as well. So that's why it ended up being the Boogaloo Lessons, because it was mainly Latin Boogaloo records which were featured in, as part of that whole thing. So once I sort of hit that sort of, in a way, a bit of a formula, but it was popular because people were buying it. You had people that knew the records from back in the day, and also people that heard it and thought it sounded good and fresh anyway. So you had sort of two sets of customers, really.
Amazing. And talking about production, what are you using now, or what have you been using most recently?
Production wise, sorry,
Yeah.
I missed that little bit. You
Yeah,
said, sorry,
production
can you
wise, yeah.
repeat that?
What have you been using? Have you got, is it mainly software? Is there hardware involved?
It's very software based, really. I mean, I've got a sort of little bit of effects, like a little dub effects little box, uh, but it's basically just straight from vinyl samples with a little bit of EQing and filtering, and then it's just trial and error of putting them all into, to Ableton Live or any equal, DAW, whatever you want to call it. So there's not a massive process. It's basically the raw samples going in one end and then being chopped up and trying to put in some sort of pattern. There's not, I haven't got banks and banks of processors or effects boxes or anything like that. So it's a very sort of basic, back to basics approach, really, I suppose, which is how it was originally done, I suppose, in those sort of styles of records that I first started hearing.
Yeah, and I guess by doing it that way and not sort of over compressing it and over affecting it, it's going to sound like a record that could have been made back then.
Yeah, I want him to sort of fit in with the old records anyway. And I think sometimes new production sounds far too clean and
Yeah.
clinical, and I still wanted that dirty sound, the crusty 45 sound. It's got the sort of whole soul of the studio and the journey of the record itself in that vinyl, in the grooves. So that's why, people say, "Oh, some of your stuff sounds rough," and that's like, well, that's how the original record sounded.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, what was it like to get that first record out, and what was the
Oh,
response?
that was brilliant. Yeah, because I just did 250 of that in the first place. And the feedback was brilliant. It was from people that I knew and respected, gave it support, which I weren't sure if they would or not, but they're genuine people. People like Snowboy, I mentioned Format, and people like that gave me big ups, and people all over. And so that was a great thing. And my friends backed me up. I called their bluff. They bought the record off me, and they like it because they're still buying more. Uh, and it was just that good feedback I got on it straight away. It seemed to just be quite overwhelming, really. It's quite touching, and it sort of spurred me on to just try and keep going with it.
Yeah, it's just that boost you need, isn't it? That, something you've done is a good idea and that there is a demand for it. And it just gives you
Yeah,
that creative boost and that creative energy to, right, what am I going to do next? What's the next thing going to be?
yeah. I mean, I like to think I'm just sort of, I'm not trying to copy a particular producer or a particular style. I'm just sort of coming up with what's been going on in my head for all these years, really. And I'm thinking all these little bits of tracks that I like dancing to at the time. Some of those could work, and if that track had a bit of this with it, that would make it even better for me. All those sort of experiences in all different types of clubs, whether it's reggae nights, hip hop nights, uh, soul nights, funk nights, all these different types of clubs and different types of uh, punters really you have in all these different places, all sort of culminated in the experience in what makes me think could be a good record to play out, could get a good reaction.
Yeah. Okay, so you put out 2, 3, 4, 5. Take us sort of through that little journey and how you were putting them out quite regularly, which is a good thing because people would get the first one and then they'd be like, "Oh, there's another one coming along," and it's keeping that momentum going for people being aware of your label, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. So every couple of months, really, I suppose the schedule. Cause it's been about a year. It was around this time last year, really, the first one came out. So since then, uh, I've had 6 properly released. The new sub label Echo Edits is on the way any day now. We're waiting for stock. It's been delayed a little bit, and then there's at least 2 or 3 more lined up that are just about to go off to press as well. So that's pretty much it. Every couple of months until the end of the year, at least, if not more. You know, and there's other stuff in the pipeline as well. So yeah, as I say, I don't want to sort of. I mean, some labels you see them putting out 2 or 3 records a week. You know, I don't think people can actually afford to keep up on every release on that label. But I like to have a label that people can enjoy collecting. There's only limited editions, and hopefully even have it verges off into started to move into different genres as well. Like I've done the funky rock one, uh, and then another one. I'm going to be starting to do some reggae releases as well.
Yes, yes.
All yeah, so that's all coming up as well. But then still got some boogaloo lessons in the can. That's the next release actually after the Echo Edits. That's all pressed already and ready to go. So that's boogaloo lessons 5 and 6. Following that will be the reggae lessons. There's some other boogaloo lessons that have been recorded and finished and put on carvers to play out at little clubs as well for the next few months and see how they go down as well.
Amazing. And it's great that you can get that reaction straight away from people to know it's a good record because you've got a carver of what it is.
Yeah, that was
Now,
it. I
what's
mean, that
the
was it.
sorry, go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so what's the process now in terms of getting carvers? Is it easier to do? Is it more expensive than it
Yeah, I mean,
used to
there's a
be?
few one-off places to do one-off ones. Vinyl Carvers is the guys that I use. They're down on the south coast, I believe. Basically, you just upload a WAV file, a couple of WAV files to them, and they turn it around in 3 or 4 weeks. So if you're just working on something, it's 20 quid for 2 sides. It can't go wrong, really. It's
No.
cheaper than sort of buying some new stuff anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And it sort of gets you to hear it. And obviously, if you need to like tweak it or re-EQ it
Yeah, exactly.
or
There's
anything else, it gives you that
it's a
chance
sort of
to
in between.
work with it.
It's a sort of stage before a test press, I suppose. So uh, the way of it's like the dub plate. How dub plates were always used in just gauging an audience reaction. Whichever one worked well, then that's what happened in the original, you know, era of dub plates. Really, back in the Jamaican days. When they'd take a dub plate, and if it went really well and it got a good reaction, it'd be on the streets the next week. You know, in some cases with the summer producers down there, and that's been happening all the way through. Really, I suppose the drum and bass people are doing that as well, and you know, hip hop guys always had the white labels going on. So it's all that sort of culture, really. But I mean, obviously, people had the CD burners and putting it onto DAT. So it's all that tradition, really. But it's just going back to the roots of putting it on a slab of vinyl.
Yeah, an actual bit of vinyl, yeah. And in terms of getting the records pressed, what is the state of the sort of record pressing situation at the moment?
Yeah,
Because obviously, so there was, I think it seems to have improved from what I've read. There seemed to be a bit of an issue, and there was lots of delays, and things were taking forever. But
yeah.
doesn't
There's
seem to
some.
be so much of a problem now.
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit.
Sorry, it doesn't seem to be
Yeah,
so much of a problem
basically
now.
the I've been quite lucky really. I've had uh, dealing with a couple of people so far with the pressings, and been a very good service in the end. So it's obviously a case of if you, I think if you're a regular customer as well, they try and help you out a little bit more. Uh, but it's also meeting the people that are good, but know what they're on the same wavelength as me. They're doing a similar thing anyway. They're already doing it, so I've been doing it via them. So
Cool.
that's the way I've been approaching it, meeting some good people, and they use the people that I know anyway, so I know they're going to do a decent job.
Nice. Okay, you said that obviously there's the sort of new sub label,
Yeah,
Echo Edits. So tell us a little bit about how that came about and the first release that's imminent.
yeah, that's right. It's literally just somewhere in the delivery system at the moment, hopefully. That was where young Greg Belson contacted me. When was it? It was only really a couple of months ago. It all happened really quickly. He had these edits of new called The Preacher. I don't know who it was, but it was a good friend of his, apparently. Nod, nod, wink, wink. And he came up with these, and he goes, "Oh, I've got these re-edits. That would you be interested in putting them out on your label?" Because he's been really supportive of my label anyway. And I said, "Well, actually, I've got a load of re-edits myself. I've been piling up for ages, but I want to keep distinct from the echo chamber recordings because they're more of a proper production, and an edit is a different thing, really." So I thought, right, well, maybe I'll start up a little sub label and we'll do that. And then I sort of sat down a couple of evenings and came up with some designs, and we agreed to design on it. And then he sent me over the files, and then we got all that going on, really. I mean, it's going to be coming up, you know, any day now. It should be releasing, but the pre-orders have been brilliant so far. I think more than 2/3 have gone already with pre-orders, with
Wow,
direct
amazing.
orders, direct from me and from Bandcamp. And then there's been a few retailers have already ordered a bunch of copies as well. So that's already, that's already. So there's already some more of those planned as well.
Cool. And do you think that's the sort of state of the 45s community at the moment? Do you think people are buying more? Are they being more selective about what they're buying? Is it a price thing as to what they're buying new?
It's very difficult to say, really. I mean, uh, I think there does seem to be a glut of stuff coming onto a market, although a lot of it seems to be, in a way, it's repeating a lot of stuff. It's a lot of remixes and re-edits of records that have been known for ages and ages. So I'm trying to find a little gap in the market, really, and trying to bring out stuff that's got original samples, or you might have hints of stuff that's known, but I want it to be then presented in a different way rather than simply, some re-edits are here are really well-known tracks that somebody just puts a beat on the end over the top of it, and it's just like, well, it's already a really well-known track before it anyway. So what we want to do with the edits label is put out quite obscure tracks, not necessarily expensive tracks, but some maybe, but more sort of just stuff that's under the radar that sounds really good in the first place, and then sounds even better when we sort of slightly jig it around a bit. And I think that's sort of, and keeping it sort of short runs as well. I think with the Echo Edits label, we're just going to be doing 300 runs, and that's it completely. Just bang bang. Once they're gone, they're gone. So I think that keeps people interest up as well as trying to gauge the style of music to stuff that people would dig as well.
Yeah, and I suppose it's finding the DJs that are going to use it in sort of live sets and at festivals and at parties and things like that. But because of, obviously, we'll move on to live streaming in a minute, but also DJs on Twitch, and something that is going to work to as many people as possible. Now, there's almost like two markets potentially of
Yeah, there's
DJs who are
definitely,
playing the
yeah.
records.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, there's two or three markets in. Also, you got a lot of people who do their radio shows as well, even if it's
Yeah.
not on Twitch. So there's a lot of the TWR DJs that are good customers. They've been supporting me as well, uh, and yeah, I mean, it's trying to sort of not spread myself too thinly, but it's good to appeal to different markets for different reasons. As I say, a lot of people were buying the Latin Brothers stuff was because they knew some of the tracks I'd sampled, and were thinking, "Oh, I like the way you've used that, and made it into something different." And I can remember that record from like 1988 when it was big on the mod scene or whatever, or big down the 100 Club. And then you've also got people that are going, "Oh, it's a really fresh sound. I really like that sound that you're using, with a bit with extra beats, and it keeps the dance floor moving. I think retro clubs, in a way, have been around for years and years now. Anyway, a lot of the stuff I've been involved in is always DJing that sort of sound of the 60s and 70s sounds, across the genres of music. So you can see how even younger age groups really react to that really well as well, even if it's us old farts just sort of playing records that we knew from when we were kids.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about streaming, then we'll come back to some live events and some things that have been happening recently or coming up for you.
Yeah,
Obviously, you don't stream from your own place, but you stream with Graham, Ouija, at his place, and
yeah,
you
we
guys have been
do. We
guests on
do a
Coffee
few
and
regular
Donuts a few
hookups. Yeah,
times.
yeah,
So let's talk about Graham first, though. How did you guys meet? Because he's been on the show. I've had him as a guest on a few times.
yeah.
How did you guys
Again,
meet?
that was one of these things that was an online thing. You sort of meet these people online. You realise they don't live that far away from you. I think he first asked me to come over for fancy being a guest and that. And when you meet up, you realise you got lots of other mutual friends and people over the years you used to knew, from different places, and people you know now, you both know at the moment. You hook up, and practically wise, I live sort of outside Glasgow. It's quite in the middle of nowhere, really, sort of 4 miles to the nearest shop. But Graham's sort of between where I live and Glasgow, so practically it's only sort of 25 minutes away. So it's pretty close to me. It's almost like a neighbour, really. Uh, so we've been hooking up, and he does his little thing. He's got his little setup and round at his. So that's the way I do it. I mean, often I'm quite lucky. I'm still managing to be with you here because we still rely on sort of mobile Wi-Fi as such. We haven't even got
Right.
a proper broadband connection here, which is another reason why I've been loath to sort of try and do a ongoing Twitch session or anything like that. But that's something I
Is that
might
something
develop in
that's
future. But
yeah? Is that something
I
that's
sort of
coming
tend.
to you?
Yeah.
Some better broadband?
Sorry, I
Is
didn't hear
better
you then.
is better sorry, is
Internet's
better
cutting out
broadband
again,
coming your way?
just as I said.
Is better broadband coming your way at some point, do you think?
I'm sorry, I'm losing you a bit there. Just stop speaking about the internet
Right, is
connection.
that better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're a little bit Daleki, but I can hear you okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay. All right then. Last sort of thing. What have you got coming up live? You're doing some live events coming up. What have you got
Yeah.
there?
So actually, this next few weeks we got a few things. Well, next couple of months actually. So myself and Ouija, Graham, we're off to Kelburn Festival next weekend. Well, this weekend coming. We're there again on the Sunday night. We did it last year and had a really good time. So we were up there in the saloon bar on the Sunday night. I think we're doing a sort of 7 till 9 o'clock set, which sounds like an early door set, but we got everyone going along, dancing away from almost his first record last time. So that was an enjoyable thing. And also, I think the same stage you got the Athens of the North guys are on there as well. So it'll be good to meet up again, with the likes of Fryer and that. So that should be a good session. What else we got? Then in Glasgow, when's that? That's it. Saturday the 3rd of August. Mentioned before, my DJ format. He's actually coming over for a gig up at Flying Duck Saturday the 3rd of August. So I'm DJing alongside him with Funk Punk, who's Stevie Scanlon, who's putting a do on. That's a proper evening. Goes on till 3. And then what else we got? Oh yeah, we got our guys. We used to do a club in London called the Black Cat, and sort of
Yeah.
had a trip down to London earlier in the year. We used to do a lot of stuff. It's probably finished about 10 years ago. But it was a whole group of us used to do that. Ended up doing a lot of other clubs as well, and guest spots and festivals around that sort of time. And we had a bit of a sort of reunion meetup, and we ended up in a venue called the White Bear in Farringdon, who just started putting on little music events. So we've started up another regular thing back down there in London, central London in Farringdon. So we're there every couple of months now, and we've called it the Cat is Back, rather than
Yeah.
just being the Black Cat. So that's us. So that's a thing to do with is like Dean Chalkley, Dom Cater, Matty Jackson, Neil Barker. Then we're going to be having different guests down as well. So we've got Mark Professor and what's he called now? Guy called what's he called? That's it. Harrison Guyat, he's called. He's like a sort of younger guy. He does a lot of soul clubs and that down in London as well. So Mark Professor's a great sort of. He's a man of records. He knows all sorts, but he's also plays a lot on the reggae scene. He's also great on the mic and toaster. He's done some records with Ron Tom and that as well in the past. He used to do the Wreck It Up nights, but were sort of big events in Shoreditch and all around there. So he's our guest then. So that's on the Friday, the 9th of August. So that's a White Bear in Farringdon. And then also, Ouija has been putting together the 45 day in Glasgow,
Yeah.
which is at the end of August. Which unfortunately I don't think you're able to make that, but we've
It's my
marketed that
wedding
as a
anniversary, so it's one day I
Oh,
probably can't be DJing.
fair enough. That's a pretty decent excuse. We'll accept that one. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
at
It's
the
not.
Cools, yeah. So again,
Yeah,
that's
I
that's
saw that. Now, interestingly, when I was in Edinburgh, I can't remember if it was the last time or the time before, but there was some guy from Glasgow who kept saying you should definitely do a 45s thing in McColl's, and obviously it's
right.
great to see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of these things we got. So it's a Saturday, the 31st of August, and it's sort of coinciding with two other things that are happening in the same venue. So we're going to be doing it from noon till 8. And then the guys, Stevie Watt and Paul Malloy for High Street Funk and Soul Club, they're there every month as well, doing their thing in the bar. They're playing, funk 45s, funk LPs, all that sort of, mainly the new sort of funk sound. But also on that night, sort of coincide with the High Street Funk and Soul, they've got Bongolian are playing live as well in the room next door.
Nice.
So it's quite a good festivity of all things funky and Hammond flavoured, really.
Yeah. Okay. We talked a little bit about going to Ouija's to stream, but how do you find the streaming experience? Obviously, you've done radio shows, obviously, you do live events. How do you find the interaction in terms of live streaming?
Yeah, I suppose it is. It's that in between thing, isn't it? I mean, when I do my radio, I always do it as a pre-record, so I never get the feedback straight away anyway. So it's just good to get the messages off people and knowing a few people are in there, and you get the sort of little messages of, oh, what a tune, or where can I get this, or what's this again, and where'd you find that? So it's a good little interaction. It's almost like sort of, as you say, it's been about back to mime sort of thing, really, with a few other mates in the room, and you're just playing records, and a few people go, "Oh, that's a good one. Tell me about it." That's all good, you know. It doesn't have to
It-
be every record you have to ask about, but as long as they enjoy the full set, it's good.
yeah. And it's almost coming back to what you were saying at the beginning in terms of obviously having to put on events to go and listen to these records. It's almost like we're doing it online now. You were saying to me, right, come to this channel, come to this space for a couple of hours,
Yeah,
and here's some good
and
music
now,
that I can play you.
yeah, and also nowadays, I think Graham usually tries to record them as well. So even if people can't make it, because obviously even if it was we used to do the mid morning matters, it was mid morning matters. That sounded
Morning
partridge.
delights,
Morning delights, yeah.
mid morning mass.
But it got a bit partridge, yeah. So we used to do that. So obviously people are not around. Not everyone's around on a Wednesday morning to listen or watch us. So we used to record those and post those up online as well for when people wanted to check back on them. But it's always, I suppose, there's so much of it now as people got so much choice of how many things to listen to and how many shows to listen to again. So it's always it's always hard to find that. But as long as you're putting it out there and people have got the opportunity to hear it, and you can keep pushing on. Some people might have heard a show of mine from 2 or 3 years ago, and they'll suddenly go, "Oh, what was that track you played then?" And I'll try and search
Try
through the
and
records
try and
of the
remember.
track listing I posted up or whatever.
Yeah, I'm terrible. I don't put track listings up, so it would be a nightmare if someone did ask, unless they ask at the time. But
Yeah,
it is what it is. But yeah, no, it's just about like you were saying earlier, you get a positive response, and the same with the label. You got a really positive response. People were into it. That gave you that creative energy and journey to sort of think, right, let's do something else. And it's great to see things growing. And I'm assuming, I can't remember if you said to me before or after the show started, that there's still quite a lot of edits and things like that ready to come for the label.
yeah. I've got piles of stuff. I'm not going to be. It's just going to be a case of then getting the process of getting them lined up. Really, yeah. I've got quite a few, as I say. I've got several reggae 45s. I've got some more Latin funk stuff, some sort of funky Cuban styles I've been working on for that. of the sort of funk Latin funk series, the reggae series. There's some more funky rock stuff. Uh, there's Boogaloo lessons 7 and 8 are already done and in the can as well. So that's probably, that will take me into early next year as well as some sort of collaborations I'm doing with a certain label. I'm just going to be talking about getting the licensing done of those, where they've kindly let me have some separate stems for some old funk records.
Amazing.
So I've been working
Amazing.
on some sort of
Yeah.
remixes of those. Yeah, so that would all be hopefully announced sometime this year as well. Once I sort of get to the actual legal side of just getting a license for that, But
Yeah.
it's definitely a goer if they're up for it.
And do you think you're going to get to the stage where you put out an album? I mean, is that like an aim, or are you just
Uh,
concentrating on 45s?
yeah, I mean, the only problem with albums is it's just the practicality of storage and sending them out and everything.
Yeah.
It's the extra cost of sending them out. Like Panos, who does Nobody Buys Records, he's been doing sevens for ages, and he's done a couple of LPs, but he's just done a 12-inch, and he's saying about the extra hassle and costs and storage of going from a 12-inch size to from a 7-inch. But that it could be a possibility of albums, but I've no plans at the moment. But never say never. In a year or two, could be there.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay. I think we're pretty much there. But let me just set this raid quickly. I think we're going to go, as you've been talking about Latin music, we're going to go and see, I think, DJ Bill. Let me just double check. Yes, he's still online. So we're going to go and see him. But yeah, thank you so much
Okay.
for being here. It's been a pleasure.
No,
Thank
it's
you everyone
gone.
for tuning in on here and also on Instagram. We've had quite a few sort of people sort of rolling through Instagram, which is good. And yeah, it's been educational. I've learned a lot. It's been
It's been
interesting
fun.
to hear the journey, and it's really exciting to see where it's going to go, and interested to see where it's going to go next.
Thanks very much. No, well, thanks for all your support. From again, you were there from day one helping out, so it's always good to see, and it's
It's
always good
about
to start spreading
collaborating,
the
isn't it?
word.
It's about
Yeah,
working together for a for all of us to grow into our own little
yeah,
communities and things we want to do.
that's the way as I say, from the stuff I've been doing over the years. It's good to sort of see the people I've known over the years then supporting me now. And those contacts helping out where they can and all that kind of stuff. So in a way, that's the sort of fruition of sort of all these years. Of the overnight success, it's only taken 30 years.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But cool. Hang on there, man. We'll have a quick chat after the show. But I'm just going to end the stream on